Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to attending today's Reels. I'm Joyce Hurtko, and I will do an introduction of today's presenters. I apologize for my voice, but that's what it is today. So, Simran Trana is the Associate Vice President for Innovation and Commercialization at Indiana University. Her position reflects the university's increased focus on facilitating faculty innovation and translation of innovation into the marketplace to serve the public. The Innovation and Commercialization Office at IU, with the acronym ICO, exists to ensure that important discoveries at IU reach potential clients by engaging stakeholders to deliver products and services for the benefits of consumers and partners. Simran has 27 years of experience in business development, technology licensing, venture creation, and new product launch. Simran brought one of her team members that we're happy to introduce today as well, Mike Maryan. Mike is the technology commercialization manager at the ICO, right? IU Office of Innovation and Commercialization. He evaluates the commercial potential of intellectual property, determines IP protection strategy, develops relationships for commercialization and startup funding opportunities, supports faculty startups, and lastly, but I'm sure there's more in small print, prepares and negotiates licenses. So we're really excited to have Simran and Mike here. They have worked with many of our Regenstrief investigators in the past and current ones, and think this will be a great opportunity for us to understand more about what they do and how we can collaborate. So welcome and thanks for coming over.
Thanks, Joyce. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing your lunch with us. We really, really do appreciate it. It's a nice day. You could have been out for a walk, and here you are stuck with us. So thank you. Thank you for making the time. I'll be talking just a little bit about academic tech transfer. And you're all aware it's not an easy thing to do, but maybe a slightly deeper understanding of why it's so hard and what are the different areas that we need to focus on when we talk about taking technology from an academic lab to market. And then I'll just give a general overview of our office and perhaps just the activity that we have at IU. So one of the things that I always remind people is when you talk about academic research, university research, who funds it? What is the genesis of the technology that comes out of universities? And a majority of it is funded by the federal and state organizations. And so when we write research grants, we are looking to write grants to people who are often looking at very long-term problems and long-term solutions. So the horizon which the academic inventions are trying to meet is much longer term and is not immediate. And we are also looking at blue sky or nascent research that doesn't have a lot of stuff that's already been done. So you really are looking for de novo new ideas, which may be disruptive, which may have no natural home. So the genesis of academic tech transfer compared to industry, which is very focused on a potential market, that's what they always start with, which is the largest market that will give the largest profit. And that's what they're developing products for. This is just not how we approach IP or approach research. And given that focus, when a research project is done, the output of that, pivoting that to applied commercial technology takes a lot of additional steps that sometimes we don't quite focus on. So what comes out of a lab at the end of a federally funded research project takes a lot of development, a lot of additional investment before it is even investable by private funds. And that is the gap, and that is the conversation typically when you disclose something to our office that we want to have with you to say, okay, this is great technology, but what do we really have that exists today? And what do we need to do to attract an entrepreneur if you want to do a startup, to have them put their sweat and equity and effort into an opportunity that may be reasonable? Is there an industry partner that wants to come in? Or is it a social entrepreneurship concept? So what is the end point? And really trying to understand where we are at that date when you come and talk to us, to what would it take to commercialize it successfully, and most importantly, engage a partner who's going to spend their full time on that translation and commercialization, whether it be an industry partner or an entrepreneur. So those are the things that the pieces or the components that we need to develop to get to that practical application. So first is just the technology development itself. You may have a paper napkin sketch of all the variables that will define improved sort of physician use of, or improved physician delivery of care, right? You have all the components, but putting that together in a way that a health system or a hospital can use easily, that's a long, long step away. So once we get that, we have to de-risk the concept, we have to de-risk the technology, and we have to harden it into a format that can be easily consumed by a potential customer. That in itself is a huge investment and a huge transition. The next question then becomes, even when you have the technology and you can show that it works really well, you can implement it, it's an algorithm that is the best search of pixels in the cloud, but what are you then going to apply it to? So what is the product or the application that will be the easiest to get to market and will be the most attractive to attractive from a market perspective, but also maybe the simplest to execute? So you have the technology, now you have to identify an application and you have to apply the technology to that application. The next thing is, okay, so you've got a technology, you've got a product, you've got a market identified, but what is the go-to-market strategy? Are you going to open a center or an institute within the university where you're just going to provide the service as a university institute? That's always a possibility. Or do you want to spin it out of the office and have a startup? Or is there a company that could license? So what is that go-to-market strategy going to be? And once you've identified that, that's when an actual license agreement actually occurs. So from the point of disclosure of an invention to the office to saying, okay, we even know what we're going to do with this is a long and lengthy conversation, and it requires your engagement and our engagement to explore what that eventual solution would look like for a customer and who the customer is and what is the value there. I want to pause before I move from that general concept. Does that kind of make sense, or is that kind of what you experience or what you feel?
Well, this is Malaz from off. Can you hear me?
Yes, Malaz.
This is really, really beautiful. Maybe too linear.
Mm-hmm.
In the real world, as you know, is not that linear.
Yes.
For example, some strategy we've been doing is focusing on our on scalability and sustainability and implementability in the beginning when you face a problem to solve.
Yes.
Which is very different than the traditional way of blue sky. So if you follow this, the output will be, as you know, it's 17 years minimum, 14% hit rate, 1% generalizability, $1 billion plus per product. But it's beautiful for understanding. But I want to just to let people know, at least from my own experience, it's more of a circle, cycle, and it's in and out. It's not as smooth as the way you amazingly simplified beautifully. But some of us scientists sometimes get very precise.
Yes. And Malaz, you're absolutely right. Things may come in at different levels and different things may be further developed or behind. And it is, when you develop a particular application, you may have to go back and refine the technology, or it is iterative. So thank you for bringing that up, and the fact that it is much more complex than my 4 points. And I did want to talk about one other thing that is unique to academic institutions that makes this even harder if it is not hard enough already. And that is a pressure to publish. So in order to get our promotion and tenure and everything else that the university values, we want to get our latest and greatest inventions out into the public as soon as possible before we get scooped by someone else, right? So we publish way earlier than our competitors in industry. People who are actually developing a product will wait till they have an MVP ready before they will tell anybody what they're working on. We tell people what we want to develop when we have an idea and we have some very, very nascent data. So that creates, typically when disclosures come in or when you're starting to think about this technology, it's very early. There's a limited proof of concept. There may be lack of validation and limited information on the manufacturability and other industrial measures of commercial usability. And in addition to this, there is an additional pressure, which is the changing intellectual property framework. So it used to be that you could get, I'll use an example that may not be particularly relevant to you, but it's from the life sciences field. So if you've discovered a new antibody and you're developing monoclonal antibodies to treat psoriasis, it used to be 10 years ago, you could get very broad patents on a humanized monoclonal antibody to treat a particular, or that binds to a particular antigen. Because that technology has evolved so far beyond today, you have to have an exhaustive study of all potential monoclonal antibodies, identify the common, most conserved regions, and file a patent on that. So that change has also impacted academic institutions where we typically don't have the resources to do that kind of technology development. And that is another thing we have to factor into our thought process when we look at, if you're interested in commercialization, you're interested in actual practical application, which you want to sort of follow and implement on your own, understanding how that publication may impact commercializability and time and potential investment, and how that needs to be managed. So part of my reason for presenting all of this is we would love to engage with faculty, not when you finish your grant and are wrapping up your papers and have a disclosure, but maybe when you get a grant, especially if it's a significant grant. How can we bring in people who have worked in the area, who may be mentors in residence, who have experience in developing technology or commercializing technology in the field, to talk to you and say, what can you do during the research phase to be better prepared for commercialization while you still have some funding, by maybe reorienting a few studies and all that kind of stuff. Titus, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Malas. This is really good. One key question that's in my mind is how, as early as possible, can we figure out what's going to be a winner and what not? And I know you struggle with this a lot. You know, we've had multiple conversations about this. But what are your kind of measures to say, oh, wow, this looks like a winner, as opposed to, oh, this is just going to be another dud that's never going to go through any, awards at the USPTO?
Yeah. We do look at prior art. So when we get a disclosure, we will look at the art that exists. But prior art will just tell you what's patentable. It's not going to tell you what's marketable and what's viable in the marketplace. So in addition to patentability, what we are trying to do more of is engage mentors in residence or experts in the field who can give you a sense of the market in that particular area. And what do you need to have to be able to compete and introduce something new? So Titus, that's a component that we're really focused on building on, is getting people in. We're often not the experts. You know, there's 8 of us working with all the faculty across campus, and we are never going to know enough. What we know enough is what questions to ask, what process to follow, and how to connect you to people who are the experts that can help advise. So that's, I think, a component that we are really sort of building up and trying to do more of. So we are, just in terms of where we are located, ICO is part of the Vice President for Research Office. We are across campus, IU level office. We support IU Bloomington, IU PUI, IU School of Medicine, and all the satellite campuses. So we are part of the services offered by BPR, Office of Research Administration. Steve Martin is a colleague of mine, Office of Research Compliance, that you work with John Bauman's group all the time. And then we also have offices of Federal Relations, Foundation Relations, and Business Partnerships. These are there to help faculty generate grants with these kind of respective organizations. So that's another element. And then we also work with the deans and chancellors of research on the campuses to try to get support for funding, and also make sure that the services we're offering and the programs we're offering are aligned with the goals and the aspirations of each campus. In addition to ICO, so this is in terms of the ecosystem that we engage with. So we are internal to the university or the central administration, but we work with IU schools and departments. The Shoemaker Innovation Center at Luddy is particularly focused on students who want to commercialize technologies. We work with the cancer and the Alzheimer's drug discovery programs at the School of Medicine. There are some translational research awards that our office offers. It's up to $25,000 for work that can be completed in 6 months to make a prototype, a minimum viable product, or something that will essentially de-risk, validate, or prove your concept just enough to make it more attractive for funding and engagement with external entities. Then we also have IU Ventures. They are involved with supporting and providing funds for startups that are already formed. So they come into the picture sort of after a startup is formed and is looking for funding. And we work with you early on from day one to engage an entrepreneur, to put together a business plan, to get you stood up as a startup. So that's kind of the transition between the two. Then there's the ICBI, Indiana Center for Biomedical Innovations, which is based out of Methodist Hospital. It's actual wet lab space that's actually most reasonably priced. They have a vivarium, and it's a great facility for people who need wet lab space to start off. It's the best sort of bargain that exists probably in the Midwest in terms of startup space. And then Indiana CTSI provides some awards. We work with them as well. And then we also have a grant coordinator in our office who helps startups write SDIR and STTR grants to get funding to further support your technology. And then in addition to that, we have 16 Tech, the Dimension Mill in Bloomington, and Elevate Ventures that provide some support for startups. In terms of the volume of disclosures at IU that we handle, we get between 150, I would say about 150 disclosures a year. And of that portfolio, on average, we do close within the first year 50% of the disclosures we get, based on either a question of marketability, it's disclosure, it's the examination of what it would take to get to market, and there's maybe not as much of an interest of the faculty member to stay engaged. The IP isn't strong or broad enough if that is relevant. So these are all the issues that typically result in us closing out new disclosures that we get. And then of the ones that we work on, you can see there's about 10% that we are able to successfully license, 13% if you include the non-exclusive ones. And of those 13%, there's probably less than 5% that ever result in a product. So the attrition rate of what comes into the office and what actually gets commercialized is very high. This is just numbers based on campus. As you can see, they're fairly similar across the board. I am now actually going to hand it off to Mike to talk a little bit about our philosophy, our approach, and some of our basic processes of what happens when you send a disclosure to our office. Mike.
Good afternoon. Along with the philosophy, I'll probably get into a little bit more finer detail than the broader strokes that Simran just painted for us as well. But realistically, our philosophy at IU is to be able to find partners for the innovations that have developed within IU, and I'll get those into the market so that the public can benefit from them. Ultimately, that is the basis for a lot of the research, and that is also the basis for why we want to commercialize that, is we want to be able to get all of these great discoveries into a marketplace where it's able to help society, it's able to help individuals that have unique problems. Our mission as an entity, as ICO, is to be a partner. We want to make sure that we're managing your innovations. We want to make sure that we're able to facilitate communications with the industry partners and to get that in a nice, easy manner. I will tell you that if you disclose one innovation to us and then disclose again, that process may be a little bit different, because like each innovation, the process is a little unique based upon what that innovation is as well. And how we do this and what we aspire to do is we want to take care and we want to cultivate the ecosystem within Indiana and also across the nation and the world. And so where you guys are focused on the research and the innovations and developing those, we're developing relationships within the innovation community, the VC community, so that when those innovations do come about, we're able to go ahead and connect the partners that need to be. A lot of times, if you're interested in doing a startup, we want to be able to support you in those efforts and make those communications easier so that you're not out trying to find those connections and kind of out on your own. We are a partner in this process and we want to be there for you. So intellectual property is kind of a broad stroke. And so what are the types of innovation or intellectual property, excuse me? So you have patents, software, and then you also have the biomaterials. I think patents are very simple, right? That's what we're used to in terms of it's a physical product or a method that you've gone ahead and registered with the United States Patent Office, and you have a granted patent that you're able to then go out. Software, copyright, and trademarks are something that are often not thought about when it comes to innovation and intellectual property. And a copyright and trademark provide just as much power, and it allows you to commercialize your products just as much, but it's a different set of standards, and we'll jump into that. The biological materials and the databases, those are items that support research, and we actually have a different method for that. Those aren't typically patented, but yet they're still useful in other research, and it's something that you can commercialize and move forward. You also have the employment and enrollment contract-based solutions. So that's the IU policy on that. I'm sorry, the print on here is very small. So you've disclosed, you have an innovation, you get it commercialized. What does that do for you, your lab, and the university? When there are revenues that are brought in, you do get a third as an inventor. All inventors are a part of that third. So if there's co-inventors or anything else, a third of that invention is then split up in terms of revenues and dispersed amongst them. And then a third is split between the inventor's lab and the IU department. And then a third of that is also put into IU. And the reason that is so that we can support continuing to protect the intellectual property and make sure that we're able to provide those different relationships and develop the ecosystem there. What rights are granted? So for a patent, your rights are a little bit different than a software or copyright. A patent allows you to have the right to exclude people from making that device for 20 years or use that method for 20 years. It can stop others from making, selling, a right to exclude, right? And it's a national right. So as a patent, you will go ahead and say, I want to protect that in the US, Canada, or certain countries within the European. And each one of those require a separate filing. Copyrights allow you to express, to protect the expression in general. And those terms are longer. And I think as you continue to develop your innovations and we move more to a computer age, you'll notice the conversation between patent and copywriting is going to come up. One of the advantages of a copyright is you're protected for 70 years or longer, depending on if it was developed as a work for hire, you can get up to 120 years protection. If it is something that you've developed, it's protected for your lifespan plus an additional 70 years. So there's some benefits to that. And a lot of times in those conversations, when you disclose different ideas, especially in the software area, you may have a conversation with your commercialization manager about copywriting versus patented. So please keep an open mind in that particular area. The patent cost, as you can tell, it's also more expensive to patent an idea. Typically, the provisional patent is $5,000. And then when you move to the next stage, it's an additional $15,000. And then when you get to the part where you're going to select what countries you're going to protect in, that's $10,000 to $50,000 per country. Provisional patents, can I get an idea of an understanding of provisional patent, like who understands what a provisional patent versus a PCT is? We have a few that do, okay. When you disclose to our office and before you publish, we'll want to protect your idea. And in that particular instance, you're going to hear us talk about a provisional patent. And a provisional patent is the easy way to say that is it's holding your place in line while disclosing your idea to the United States Patent Office. And this will allow you to then go ahead and publish. But there's a time limit on that protection. There's only 12 months. And at the end of that 12 months, you have to decide on whether you're going to go ahead and move towards the more expensive and more protective, the actual patent application, which is the PCT. That is where you'll get more technical data. You'll have an examiner take a look at the patent and start investigating on whether it's novel and it is something that should be protected. So earlier, Simran had talked about the pressure to publish. That is where, if you are going to publish and you know you're going to, that's where we request and we try to want to work with you ahead of time before you publish so that we can get a strong provisional patent in. And this will be a placeholder for those 12 months while you're publishing. One of the nice things about that is as you publish, you're also letting industry know that you have those innovations available. And that does help us in conversations in terms of interest and to find out if there's anyone who's been also looking at that in terms of an innovation perspective. Typically, over those 20 years, because there is also maintenance fees, a patent will cost between $50,000 and $500,000. Within IU and our philosophy, if we get into the actual granted patent, we obviously want to make sure that we have an industry partner to help share with those costs and make sure that we're able to kind of move that technology forward. On the software side, I'm going to grab a drink real quick. Sorry. The process is a little different. There is no provisional patent. The difference is once you write that code or you have that, technically it is copyrighted. It's like a written book. When you write, it's copyrighted. But you don't have the ability to protect that because it's not registered. So the step in the software side is you're going to go ahead and you want to take these steps where you take, I think Malaz has indicated this as well, which is taking a look at the market/customer need. And then you're going to build a product, an MVP or a minimal viable product. And that is going to be a software or system that is going to do the minimum so that you can gauge whether or not that this is something that's going to help that population or help that particular problem in being solved. And the reason that you do the minimal viable is because it'll allow you to gain feedback and understand what direction you need to go. In product development, it's essentially your first gen, right? Getting that out there to understand if you've hit the mark or if there needs to be adjustments. And from there, you work on the technical solution, your source code, the binary side of that, and then you identify the product as a brand. When you get to the step of identifying the product as a brand, that's where we'll have the conversation about registering, because that is where you're going to be looking at going to market, forming a company, and moving forward from there. From a disclosure standpoint, I still recommend that if you're looking at, if you're at the MVP stage and you're building an MVP stage, that is the point to disclose, right? Bring us in, allow us to be a partner to help understand, and allow us the ability to take a look at that market and provide feedback, because not only can you take a look at, is it solving the problem, we as a partner can also let you know this is kind of what's in the marketplace, and this is where the interest lies. A lot of times also there are venture capital groups that are looking for ideas in this particular area that want to support from a financial side or want to partner with you from a business side as well. So, but before we have those conversations, you want to make sure that your idea is protected. And we'll tell you, if a company approaches you about your research, please do not have a technical conversation with them until you've reached out to us, Because a lot of times what we want to do is get a CDA, a confidentiality agreement in place, right? And the reason we do that is because if you have a conversation in the software side that you divulge the quote unquote secret sauce, well, it's out there, right? And there's no way of protecting it once that happens. And so please, and that's another avenue that we're able to assist and make sure that as you are doing your research and developing your innovation, we're able to help. So the questions always are, is it patentable? Is it copyrightable? And a lot of times we want to flip the switch, the script, which is, should we patent it? Is it patent worthwhile? If the copyright already exists, should we go ahead and take that extra step to register? And again, I think that goes back to where you're at on your innovation, if you're ready to go ahead and move that to the commercialization side, and also if we can find partners from that. Before we get into the process of once the intellectual property comes in, are there any questions in those areas?
So 2 questions. You haven't talked about trade secrets. So maybe you can explain that a little bit. And then the other thing is, maybe the reason is because it was a formative experience early in my life, but I've always kind of understood copyright to be a weak protection of software. When I was a kid, like a teenager, I worked for a software company, and my manager told me about this lawsuit that they had gotten for copyright infringement. And I'm like, well, what were the details? And he's like, oh, we changed a few lines of code. We showed it to the judge, and he's like, oh, that looks different. Well, they did infringe on copyright. They just managed to hide it well.
Yep. So I'll address the copyright versus patent. And a lot of that comes to the fact that the landscape of protection has changed quite a bit in that area. In order to get a patent on software or AI is become increasingly more difficult. And that is something that our strategies are evolving. We're constantly trying to find, and we're also reaching out to resources outside of ICO, so patent councils to work and evaluate those particular processes. What we have found lately with AI and software-based patents is it is pushing the amount of rejections out. And so we're spending 6 or 7 years trying to protect that particular, or to get that patent granted. And during that time frame, those 20 years are ticking off as well, right? So if you're granted in year 7 or 8, you only have 12 years left on the life cycle of that patent. And in software, as you know, we're in the computer age, technology tends to advance very quickly. And so what we're also seeing is a lot of times, if you do get that patent, technology has moved on to a different area. And so you've missed that 8 years of commercial opportunity. And so, yes, there are differences, and there are not the same protection practices with trademarks and copyrights, but you have to evaluate the risk versus reward on that, on whether you want to get it to market, be able to use it and protect it in that particular manner. There are advantages of being first to market. You get a lot of the market opportunities. You're able to gain those commercial opportunities that being second in line will not get you. And so that is something else to evaluate that particular time. And it is conversations that we as commercialization managers are increasingly having and trying to outline that risk versus reward, and it is a case-by-case basis. On the trade secrets, oh, yep, and I was actually going to hand you off for trade secrets too.
Mike, can I just add something to it? The other part of it is patents are, I would say there's 2 kinds of patents. One that protect a specific market, and those are really valuable because you could put a box around a market and say, to play in this particular box, you have to take a license to my patent. And it's very obvious when someone is playing in your box. You can see them out there. They're above ground. And then there are other process or technology patents, which may not be obvious. They may be underground. And universities are not very good at knowing who's using their technology. Since we aren't in the field, we aren't in that market every day. So universities filing process patents or technology patents that can't be easily implemented or easily enforced against parties is not a very good investment. It hasn't historically been a very good investment for us because we are not very strong at asserting those patents. And you typically are having to sue people for them to take a license to your patent. And there's perceived risk to that. And IU is not one of the most litigious universities out there. So I've been trying for 2 years to get IU to enforce or enforce some of our license against partners, and that doesn't happen. IU's preferred mode of technology commercialization is to have people come and take a license to us. We are not. So that is another issue. If you file a software patent, somebody is infringing it, who's actually going to go assert it? So, but on the other hand, if it is something that will allow a company to exclude other people from playing in that field, they might license it. And in software, there are so many patents that cover any single product that the value, it's like engineering, the value of an individual patent is often not clear. And again, if it's a groundbreaking new technology, a completely new field, I think it's something we would consider, but for incremental patents, it doesn't make sense. And then the big thing is, can you get to market quickly? The first, second, at the most, third or fourth participant in a market is going to capture 90% of a software market. And so really our focus is, how do we get you introduced to people and get the product to market as fast as we can to help realize that particular market? So that just generally, Titus, is the philosophy. But talking about trade secrets, it's not something universities are good at keeping. I think a faculty member can. You have full control over your research, your data, your grad students, and who you choose to do with what. But the university as an institution does not have the systems and the capabilities to ever say anything is a trade secret. At the most, we will say it's confidential know-how and we will license it non-exclusively, but we just don't have the systems to manage trade secrets.
Mike, can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
So first of all, thank you for everything you're doing. You know how I'm a big fan of yours. I think the issue is in faculty over here is we don't have the expertise and the knowledge of knowing what are the driving force for making impact. I love the philosophy that I heard from you. The whole purpose of your office is to make an impact, all right? And that's the part of the mission of the university. And I love that. That's very, very unique to IU. And I just want to let you know, and I know it's not just word on the wall. I saw that since I've been here. If you are obsessed about impact, innovation is just 5% of that impact. And under that innovation is really the IP and all these kind of things. I know we have the most control over it, but it doesn't contribute that much of the big impact. The big one is packaging. And that's what I saw from your office, how you can do it is distribution channels, implementation channels, and then marketing. And then you have to do that in the speed. So we all always dream about the blockbuster piece, but in reality, in the real world, is these little things, these small things here and there that give you the speed that make a huge impact. But unfortunately, that's the stuff we don't have control over as a scientist. We don't know how to do that. And then we put all our energy on this, and guess what happened? It slow you down. It's even triple and quadruple your time to speed to event. And that's, I think that's the value that when you reach out to us and you really say, come over, let's talk and figure out. I encourage all of the folks who are obsessed with impact to take that leap and understand it. And I can tell you, Mike, for sure, he'll work with you on that big picture so you can allocate your time correctly. This whole patent, copyright, software, all this stuff, you hear it in a little bit, that big thing, but its contribution to make an impact is very, very zero, because exactly what you said, it takes so much power to reinforce copyright, and we're not in that business. We're not lawyer for that piece. So thank you, Mike, for everything you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Malaz. And I think to Malaz's point is as soon as you feel you're ready to disclose, please reach out. If you do disclose and we close it, that's not the end of the line. All that means is we need to pause for that particular innovation. That doesn't mean you need to change your course in your research or anything else. It just means we're not quite ready to start the commercialization process. But during that period, if you do have a disclosure that is closed and your research takes additional steps or changes directions, that's another opportunity that we encourage you to reach out to us so that we can assist with maybe providing different insights in terms of the pathways of commercialization, right? Not pathways on your research, but the pathways to commercialization. And typically in those scenarios, one other thing I want to bring up is as we are developing our relationship, it's always beneficial as a commercialization manager that if you do have a new development or something has evolved in your technology, that is also a great opportunity for us to better understand and to also turn that into potential commercialization. A lot of times what we find with the research is it's the evolving process, which is the exciting, awesome part about doing all the research and the innovation is it evolves and it gets better and better and better. But I think there's also an opportunity to make sure you bring us along on that journey so that we can assist there too. And we're not over here working on earlier versions that aren't meeting your current research standards. So when we do get there, how do we license this? How do we transfer this? One of those ways is we license the IP to an industry partner. And that license is typically, it gives them rights to go ahead and utilize this innovation, use it as a product and sell it. And then based upon what they're selling on, those revenues will then trickle back in terms of royalties to you, your department, and IU. We can also sell the IP outright. And in that particular manner, that would be a lump sum. I will tell you that is usually a very small percentage of those happen. Very, very small. In fact, I don't know that I've seen one lately where that's happened. And then the other very exciting one is spinning off and allowing you an opportunity and supporting you in starting a company on your own and to do a startup. And those opportunities too, ICO has the ability to support you just outside of the IP strategy, but we also have an entrepreneurship director who has courses to assist with helping you understand what is needed to do a startup. And we also bring in keynote speakers once a month that will talk about some of the challenges they've had, or a VC group that will come in and talk about opportunities for funding. And so if you are interested and you want to scratch that entrepreneur itch, please reach out. We're more than happy to assist in that particular manner as well. And then the last one on the bucket is the giveaway. It's more of a social benefit. It's something that we felt like, okay, my research is to this point. There's not necessarily a commercial opportunity, but we do want to maybe provide that to an organization for them to use and let them benefit from that in a particular area. And how do we identify commercial sponsors or commercial partners? Well, a research sponsor, well, they're reaching out to you to to develop something. That typically means they've already know that there's a commercial opportunity for them. And that is one of the easiest ways to commercialize a product, because then you're able to reach out to that person who sponsored it and give them the opportunity to then take that to market. Contact by a licensee. We do have small companies or companies in general that will reach out that are looking at the different journals, that are going to your academic meetings. And once they hear you guys present or they see the paper that has been published, they'll reach out and say, hey, I have interest in that particular innovation and we'd like to license it. The other way that ICO is involved is we market the ideas. We will put together a marketing packet. We'll reach out to our industry contacts. If we do not have the industry contacts, we will take the time to find those contacts through alumni, through people within our network, to see if anyone knows of opportunities within the particular area of your innovation. And then also, the other one is attending industry events. We do, if you have a research and you have a portfolio research in a particular area, we'll also look at attending these meetings so that we can better understand what companies are interested in pursuing those types of innovation. And so that is a very proactive approach. And again, as sooner we know about what type of research you're doing, what area, that will allow us an opportunity to then start investigating that industry and build those contacts before it's time for us to hit play on the license. And so that's another win there. When do you have an innovation? Should you disclose? And the last point we'll get to here in a second. I'm always a fan of when do you have an innovation? Well, come ask, right? Reach out. When you have research, you have an innovation. There you go. Yes, thank you. And if you should disclose, if you are on the fence on that, you're not quite for sure if you should disclose or not, please reach out. We're more than happy to talk. We enjoy the opportunity to talk, probably a little bit more than we need to. But long story short, again, as a partner, we're here. So just reach out. We'll talk about it. If you don't have a commercialization manager already assigned to your research, that's also an opportunity for us to figure out the best fit for you and your research, because we all have areas of expertise, and we also have areas that we're kind of diving into to become experts in that particular space. And one of the other unfortunate side effects of commercialization is the fact that a scientific breakthrough doesn't necessarily mean that there's a commercial opportunity. Right? It might be an amazing breakthrough, but there may not be an opportunity for us to have an individual buy it, or people in the marketplace that want to purchase that. It's just not one of those things. Those are always the tough conversations, and ones that I'm glad that we don't have on a regular basis, but I do want to make you aware that it's a particular way. I'll be honest with you, we really work to try to make our disclosure form as easy as possible. We don't take any blood. We don't require any DNA. So please don't be afraid of that particular process. If you do take a look at the disclosure and feel it's overwhelming, please reach out again. I think if you can walk away with anything from this presentation is please reach out, right? I probably said that too many times, but we can help assist with working through that, walking through it, and kind of going. I think compared to your grant writing, you'll notice this is an easy, cheesy process. The evaluation and the disclosure. This is not something where you're going to disclose and then wish it best of luck. When you do disclose, that is where you start working with your commercialization manager. We want to understand, I've often said that this is your baby. We want to make sure we understand how you want to raise your baby and what you see your future for your baby to be. And so in that particular instance, we are going to meet with you, understand that innovation, and then we'll start doing our research on the market opportunities. We'll start taking a look at other innovations in that space to make sure that there is clarity for us to move forward. And there's going to be conversations back and forth to make sure that we do have the right areas and we are looking at the right opportunities. And I will tell you the presentation, I'm kind of going through this a little bit quicker because we're coming up to our hour. It will be available so you can kind of get in the finer details. And then on the marketing side, we do a one-pager. We have several different outlets that will utilize that post innovations from universities, that licensees that are interested in those particular areas and licensing products from universities will go to. And so you'll have kind of a web portal that we'll do, plus reaching out to our industry contacts. This is also one of those spaces I would like to point out that you can become a partner in, right? Because if you've done the research in this area, you probably know every industry player in that particular area, and you might even know people at that industry. And so that's always good to let us know so that we can either reach out or you could reach out yourselves to see if there's an opportunity for commercialization as well. And then to circle back around, I think this is probably one last good point, which is the CDA NDA. It is okay to speak with people about your product if you're at a coffee shop and you say, hey, I'm researching XYZ, right? That is not going to diminish your IP protection. Now, if you say I'm researching XYZ and this is exactly how you do it, and this is how you do it, how you make it, why we're doing it, that's probably going to diminish your IP protection, right? So a lot of times when you have conversations in a non-technical manner, you'll be fine. But again, if you have industry partners that are reaching out, please have a CDA NDA in place so that you can have that more technical conversation. And then in the end, that will allow for a higher opportunity for commercialization. Yes.
Sort of synthesizing a lot of what you've been talking about. Synthesizing much of what you both have been talking about, made the point that sometimes software innovations are often hard to price, hard to understand where the value is. When an investigator creates an innovation that does have some value,
Mhm.
and they have an opportunity to do 20% consulting as an IU employee,
Yep.
Would it make sense for them to simply consult with a company and help them understand the technique to incorporate in their tool in return for consultation dollars?
There is an avenue for that. So
Can we just do that freely? Can we make that choice ourselves?
if it is an IU innovation that's considered IP, you need to disclose that to the university because that is technically university property. So where you get into the consulting fee is if there is something that can't be protected, that would be where the conversation, because it's kind of knowledge, right? Knowledge that isn't necessarily turned in, but it's an expertise. You can use that as consultant. And I would suggest that you bring that so that we make sure there isn't any intellectual property involved in that in the form of discoveries. And so we also have situations where they will license the product and then utilizes your expertise to make sure to get it to market quicker.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So on the business side, my gut reaction is do you want the payment up front or do you want the long-term payment? Right? So the consulting fee is going to be a nice little chunk right there, and then it's over once the product's in market.
Mhm.
But if you go on the licensing side, it's going to be smaller chunks over a longer term.
Right.
And one of the benefits about licensing software or copyrights is you can get the terms of that license to last longer because it's protected longer. A lot of times on a patent, once that patent runs out in 20 years, your royalties will also diminish or go away completely because it is not protected anymore.
Mm.
And so in your instance, again, if we're talking about consulting to get something to work soon or licensing a software copyright for 90 years, that's some of those risk versus reward that you need to consider, or we would consider, I would say.
Sure. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Any other questions along that area? Okay. Let's see here. A licensing agreement, again, we grant rights for people to either produce or utilize that product. Our goals are typically to get more of a royalty plus milestones. And milestones means that there'll be a payment to the university and to the inventors when the product reaches a certain R&D level, gets FDA clearance, and then again, when it's released into market, and then obviously then have a percentage royalty over the life of the contract. You will have in a license agreement from the university with a licensee, you will still maintain the rights to continue your research. So just because you have licensed a product does not mean that you have to stop your research in that particular area or on that particular product, okay? So keep that in mind as well. And again, I think we've talked a lot about the roles of the commercialization manager and the inventor. Again, it's a relationship. And like any relationship, if you don't feed that with communication, it's going to die. And so one of those things I do encourage you is as you continue your research and your disclosures, please make sure that you're reaching out to the commercialization manager. And on the flip side, we're saying the same thing to all the commercialization managers. Reach out to your researchers, make sure that you're aware that they're aware that you're here, and continue that relationship. This is kind of the setting expectation slide, which is when you disclose, that's your confidentiality. And then there's typically a year where your research could have the potential to evolve for that finer technical details that would then be utilized when you file the PCT. And this is on a patent timeline, right? A copyright is completely different, as we mentioned earlier. Once that provisional is filed, you'll then have a year where the United States Patent Office will work to evaluate that and start that process. 99.9% of all patents are rejected when they are initially submitted. So please keep that in mind. It's typically 2 or 3 rounds of rejection before a patent is granted. And those each time are going to be challenging with different things. There are experiences where a patent examiner is going to go ahead and reject them because they have timelines or they have numbers they need to hit. So if you do hear that you get a rejection, don't be discouraged. We'll bring in the patents attorneys, we'll review why it's been rejected, and we'll work with you to address those issues. So, and that can be a year. And we've had some patents that we've been working on for 6 years, like I'd mentioned earlier. And so the process to license can be anywhere 2 to 5 years. And so that is after you've disclosed. So you've already done that hard work on your research, you've disclosed, and I know you want the reward quickly if that's an opportunity, but unfortunately, there's still some steps that need to be taken, that it could be a 2 to 5 year process. But again, the nice thing is you do have a partner, us, that will help you with that process. The factors to influence commercialization opportunities is going to be the technical merit, right? Is what problems being solved? How well is that being solved? The strength of the IP, meaning how much other protection is out there, how many other patents are out there. If there's a lot of other patents, a lot of times you'll find industry may not be as interested because there are so many different options. The market, will people buy it if it does hit the market, is essentially what that is. And the stage of development. Is this something that's going to require tens of millions of dollars to get to market? Or is this something that you can flip a switch tomorrow and get it to market? Those are another reasons that industry may or may not want to be involved with that. Licensing considerations in terms of the scope of protection, how broad or narrow is your protection? Those are other areas. And then the ownership. Why do we bring this up? You collaborate a lot of times with other individuals outside the university or within the university. And if there are multiple different universities involved and you've developed something where there's 10 other universities involved and 10 other individuals, that's going to be a very technical or a very difficult process to get everyone on board with ownership and getting a license involved. And so that can influence the potential. And the relationship maintenance, excuse me, again, are the relationships there? Can we utilize those? If not, if this is a green space, it's going to take a little bit longer to develop those relationships so you can get that to market. Quick examples, because I know we're up on time. Fluoride toothpaste developed here at IU. It was a sponsored research that actually did not get to market. The benefits for that did not happen for 20 years past the initial disclosure to Crest, right? Yes, sorry. And so again, but the reward to that was huge. Think about how many people are using toothpaste and how much. And so that 20 years was definitely a benefit for them. And there's a couple other examples that I'll let you take a look at. I want to provide any opportunity for additional questions that you have, and we'll go from there. I think that's fair. So there we go. Thank you. Are there any other additional questions or anything? No, you want to sprint back to your office and get back to work. I understand. Thank you very much for the time. I do appreciate it.